All right. Welcome back to Revolutionary Education with Donte and Jack. This is our second lesson on the use of direct action and why it is necessary, moral, and achievable. We're going to be using real-life examples to explain each of those facets and why we believe them to be true. As far as our introduction, we discussed last lesson what symbolic and direct action are. So just to refresh, let's talk about what direct action is. So I think I put you on the spot last time, so I'll go for the definition this time.
Okay.
Direct action is a political action that has a specific and immediate effect.
Yes.
And that contrasts with symbolic action that aims to produce a change in, let's call it, the hearts and minds of people.
Mm-hmm.
As far as what direct action is, we cover that in lesson 1, and I would recommend that our viewers go back to that if they need a refresher. But as far as what direct action means for us as communists and as political actors, it is basically anything that really gets something done in a political sense.
Yes.
And moves us towards progressive change.
Yes.
So we're going to cover what necessary, so direct action is necessary. We're going to cover what the reasoning we have behind that is first. So this comes from a article in Grist, which is a non-profit environmental news organization. This quote comes from the article called "You Strike a Match," which is about Ruby Montoya and Jessica Reznicek. Donte, do you know who those activists are?
I do. Would you like me to tell our studio audience?
Yes, please.
Awesome. So Jessica Reznicek and
Ruby Montoya.
And Ruby Montoya were two climate activists who, at multiple points in their political career, did peaceful protests, sit-ins, boycotts, and various other non-violent, peaceful, symbolic courses of action to educate the public and hopefully influence fossil fuel corporations.
Specifically the Dakota Access Pipeline. There was pushback in every state where it was proposed with the No DAPL campaign. And Ruby and Jessica were extremely active in that movement as far as, I'll read the quote to give you an idea. But they were active mostly in Iowa, and they came to the conclusion after all these symbolic actions that only direct action was going to get anything done. And so they engaged in direct action. And we'll discuss what that really was in a minute after I read the quote. They'd already attended public hearings, gathered signatures for environmental impact statements, and participated in marches, rallies, boycotts, encampments, and hunger strikes. They'd even locked themselves to the backhoes that were used to excavate the pipeline. Between the two of them, they'd also logged a handful of arrests. But all those measures failed to permanently halt construction of the oil pipeline, and by late autumn, a diagonal line of pipe lay across the entire state of Iowa. So, once again, Jessica and Ruby were extremely active in the movement against the Dakota Access Pipeline. They did all the symbolic actions. They tried all that. And despite all of their efforts, the pipeline was continuing to be built. As of April 8th, 2023, there had been 2,467 public incidents of oil and gas spills and environmental incidents related only to the Dakota Access Pipeline. It was always going to, no matter how well it was built, make these environmental hazards a possibility and a unavoidable consequence.
Not to mention just the deforestation and the disturbance to the ecosystem just to build it. Mm-hmm. Even if the pipeline never bursted, which we all knew it was, just the creation of it destroyed so much usable land and contaminated so much usable water that is now unusable.
Undrinkable. It also violated native lands, which were, I believe, in the Black Hills, if I I'm not mistaken. But Native people already had claim over that land, and the Dakota Access Pipeline was just built over it anyway. Yeah. Ruby Montoya and Jessica Reznicek cost the company building the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is, they were called Energy Transfer Partners, around $6 million. And the source from that is from Stop Fossil Fuels organization. And the reason that they ended up costing them so much money was not because of any of the symbolic actions they did. They took direct action using acetylene torches to disrupt construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline for months, leading up to their eventual arrest. 2 people spent a couple $100s on their torches. They prevented the Dakota Access Pipeline from spilling oil and gas into the water table, like it is doing now, for 6 months. And none of that happened using symbolic action. That only happened using direct action. And that is the only possibility for us going forward. As far as moral theory on why direct action is moral, we wanted to highlight a moral theory called utilitarianism. The basic outlines of this theory are that direct action is moral because it would minimize the harm to people. Intentions do not matter very much, and a good specific and immediate consequence is going to be criteria for determining a good action.
Yes.
As far as the responsibility you have for other people's actions, utilitarianism posits that the effects of an action you couldn't have foreseen are not your responsibility.
Yes. A concrete example. There is an enslaved individual, and they want to run away towards Canada. They are in the South and they want to be free. However, their slave master tells them, if you were to run away, I will kill, murder, and torture all of your fellow enslaved individuals. This person decides, I cannot stand the torture anymore, the psychological suffering. I am going to run for my own freedom. And thus they leave and they are safe. The slave master, true to his word, goes on a rampage and starts torturing all of the remaining slaves to intimidate them and horrify them so no one else seeks freedom. Now, who is responsible for the torture of those enslaved peoples? Is it the individual who ran for his freedom, or is it the slave master? Now, many people, unfortunately, will blame the individual who ran for their freedom. They made a decision. They took direct action. They took control of the circumstance. They had agency, and they managed to flee. Who else has agency in this circumstance? The slave master has agency. The slave, the person who was enslaved, made their choice and acted. They committed their direct action. The slave master, who is a willing participant, makes their choice next to then enslave other people. By blaming the victim, you're taking away the agency of the perpetrator.
They often remove the agency of everyone but the direct actor.
But the direct actor.
Right.
But the victim.
But the victim. Leftists and liberals so often decide to blame the victim for quote-unquote escalating a situation that was already escalated.
Right.
That was an action in self-defense.
Yes.
That was a choice to assert their humanity in the face of bigotry. And bigots enforcing that is not their fault.
It's not their fault. It's really getting to the circumstance that like a bigot will go up to a minority group and say, if you breathe, I will kill you. And when that minority group breathes and then they are murdered, blame them. Exactly.
Yeah. Pretty ridiculous. And incorrect with, like, inconsistent with moral theory.
Yes.
And so that's what we mean when we're talking about the butterfly effect, right?
Yes.
It's not the victim's fault that they're acting in self-defense. It's not the direct actor's fault that they're acting to preserve our planet or our safety.
Yes.
That is their responsibility in many ways. To cover moral theory just a little bit more, we wanted to go into detail about utilitarianism and present you with some situations. So, the trolley problem is a very common, well, it's a meme, but also it's a like real life philosophical question that has a very easy answer that many people get wrong.
Yes.
There are 5 people on a trolley track, and a trolley is about to run them over, right?
Yes.
And unless you redirect the track to a track where there's 1 person on it, those 5 people will die. It is utilitarian to sacrifice the 1 person on the other track for the good of the majority. And there is nothing about the situation that should change your opinion on that.
Mm-hmm.
Not if the 1 person on the other track is your best friend. Not if
they're your enemy.
If they're your enemy. Not if they're a random person. Not if you have to take action in order to help them. In order to understand utilitarianism, we have to understand that every person is equal under that moral theory. They all have their lives and their wills and their desires, and it is only action and power that can change the situation under which they live. And as far as the different scenarios that philosophers often present, that should not change the outcome of the trolley problem. It should not change if you are the 1 person on the track that you have to redirect the trolley in order to save these 5 people. It should not change the scenario when you have to push someone onto the track if it is the 1 person that would save 5 people. It is utilitarian and it is correct. And as far as understanding those situations, I think it's necessary to go over some specific thoughts about morality and truth and the right thing to do. So that's what we'll do here, is ask you, is the truth less true if it's not well known, if it's said rudely to you, or if someone you dislike says it? The answer to all of that is, of course, no. But let's give some examples. Just because the majority of people don't care about trans folks, for instance.
Right.
Doesn't mean that it's not true and correct to care about their well-being.
Yes.
You know?
In the 1800s, many black people are being oppressed. Many black people are enslaved. It was the unpopular opinion that black people should have the same rights as white people. Not just that they should be free, no, but they were equal and had the same rights to white people. Should black people have been enslaved and never freed because a majority of white people in their time did not think that it was the right thing to do? A majority of women were considered property. At that time, should they have never been given the right to vote or own a bank or own property? Most men to this day are pretty sexist. Mm-hmm. Should we only grant the rights of a minority group if the majority thinks it's okay? Obviously not. Yeah. Most of you, all of you, I would hope, would say no, that is ridiculous. Yet somehow it gets
lost in the shuffle.
The
real world examples.
Yes.
Yeah. But to understand that there is universal right and wrong. We have to forget our liberal upbringing with culture, right? Because there's this idea that culture is beyond criticism, or actions are beyond criticism if they come from a black person or a European person or a gay person. And that is not true. People are always within the realm of criticism.
Yes.
And it's always correct to criticize things that are anti-people and things that hurt the rest of us. Mm. To go into a example about truth, the words of angry trans people today are not incorrect if they're rude.
Right.
They are not wrong if they are an unpopular opinion. And if you don't like a trans person and feel that they are cringe or beyond your
sensibilities,
beyond your sympathy, that still doesn't mean that they're wrong to advocate for themselves and to demand their rights. In the same vein, the right thing to do is not less right if it's difficult, if it's unconventional, or if it's unpopular. This is true always, and that is, I would almost call it a moral law, that the right thing to do is always right no matter what. And that's, it's a scientific principle too, that if something is true across all of the past, then it will likely be true across the future too, mm-hmm. right? Like, enslaving people is always wrong, mm-hmm. no matter the cultural context, and no matter the popular opinion.
Right.
That is just the way it is. And there's nothing to be said more than that, as far as teaching that.
Yes, I think, and just to build off of what you
absolutely.
Just said, it's not just that, they're always, a lot of people will think that it's like, for example, slavery or segregation. Segregation is a perfect example in this. People want to say that segregation was such a terrible thing, but those kinds of things are in the past, okay? That segregation was built on total nonsense. There's no logic behind that segregation. Segregating trans people, that's built off of facts, you see. That's built off of reason. We are making those decisions now, so it has to be logical. No. Okay. There are certain hills that will never be won, in the sense that we will always be fighting for civil rights and liberties and justice for minority groups and for all individuals. There are, just because we have, for example, a Civil Rights Act, does not mean that we will keep that Civil Rights Act, or that all the rights and justices that belong to us under the Civil Rights Act will remain enforced. So you have to constantly be ever vigilant, be the watcher on the wall, fighting to maintain those rights that they want to take away, and give rights to minority groups that have often been denied it.
Just to say one more thing on utilitarianism. Choosing to do nothing because of the potential you might do harm to someone you care about is the same as doing nothing for any other reason.
Yes.
There is no doing nothing that is correct, that is good or moral.
To speak in particularly about the latest left-wing discourse and choosing to do nothing. TYT, the Young Turks, have made a lot of comments recently about the trans community that I feel need to be called into question. Kasparian and Cenk Uygur have suggested to the trans community that they do nothing in response to legislation being passed that would segregate trans athletes and or exclude them from participating in whatever sport that matches their gender. They are telling this minority group that they should accept this L. Take
this level of discrimination.
Take this level of discrimination. This level of segregation should be acceptable for you. And I want to bring that up in the way that the Young Turks is a left-wing organization. They mean to help trans people by giving them this terrible, terrible, terrible advice. But it's really the same thing as doing nothing. It's doing nothing but in other words. Republicans would say you should do nothing because this is justice and this is fair to exclude trans people from participating in
public life.
The Young Turks and progressives of their mindset will suggest that you do nothing because it will benefit you later on in life. Either way, regardless, by doing nothing, You are taking the same position and having the same results. Those trans people will be excluded and marginalized from sports and from larger society. And so the question is, this particular course of action that you're going to do. Let's talk about a direct action or symbolic action. Would your opponents agree with you doing this same action? And will it have the same results as what your opponents want? If so, you have done no progress for your movement.
You've done net zero good.
You have done net zero good. If your aim is to cut off your arm because you believe it will help you later on in a combat situation, and your opponents want you to cut off your arm because it believes it will help them later in a combat situation, and you cut off your arm,
you've still made the same decision.
You've still made the same decision.
Whether or not you think it's going to benefit you in the long run, as it likely won't, if your opponent thinks that you should do that, maybe call it into question.
If the outcome is the exact same as what your opponent wants,
maybe it's not the best course of action for your benefit.
Yes.
You know, I mean, that should be very understandable. But it's because, like, liberals don't view Republicans as their enemies. They view them as misguided, miseducated, well-intentioned people.
Individual that have the same goals as we do.
Mm-hmm. Which is capitalism.
Yes.
And, you know, the choice is between going in, staying out. If you waste too much time, you've already decided to stay in.
Yes.
And we don't have any time to waste.
That's flawless. That's a great way to talk about that is climate change. While we sit around and debate with Republicans about climate change and the use of fossil fuels, we're continuing to use fossil fuels, furthering the expansion of climate change and global warming. July 4th of 2023, this year, was the hottest day in human history ever recorded by mankind. Terrifying. While we spend day after day arguing about courses of action and nothing gets done, everything remains the exact same. Rich people get richer, poor people get poorer, and the effects of climate change will doom us all into oblivion. So we need to be taking direct action now. Regardless of people understanding all the aspects of it. Mm-hmm. There are Republicans who do not believe climate change is real. Should we wait until there is consensus on Republicans? What's the it's like something out of like 9,091 scientists.
Oh, it's like 98% of scientists or something agree upon climate change and global warming is a huge problem caused by human intervention using fossil fuels. Like, yes. They agree on all of those points.
All of that. Should we wait until that 1% comes around?
No.
No.
No, we should not.
I would really hope that you weren't waiting for us to give you that answer.
Yeah.
But yes.
No, consensus is not nearly as important as positive change.
Yes.
It just isn't. That is, and if you disagree, that is a fundamental flaw of values.
Yes. I want to bring up, unfortunately, TYT is a gold mine for anti-trans propaganda right now. Another great example brought to us by Anna Kasparian was her now infamous quote, "If cis white women don't like it, then it's not inclusion." Pause for effect. Okay, so
it's not about whether you like it or not.
It's not about whether you like it or not.
It's about whether it's the right thing to do.
So the in particular quote, which I'm going to paraphrase for you right now, is the term birthing person being used to include people with wombs who
have the capacity for pregnancy. Yeah.
Who have the capacity for pregnancy, like the term birthing person, rather than referring to them as women, because lots of people can have the capacity for birth but aren't women. Anna finds that deeply offensive.
That anybody would dare to, she says, call her a birthing person.
Yes.
Which is, no one was doing that.
She has yet to come forward to say
come with an example
that anyone has actually called her that. But
I think it is the general use of the term that actually offends her, and I don't want to misrepresent what she's really saying, which is that she finds the separation between women and capacity for birth as offensive.
As offensive.
Yeah.
I would argue that would be incredibly offensive to say birthing people as women only mean women.
Absolutely, and she is wrong. She is wrong to be offended by that.
Yes.
But it is also true that no one was making her use this term for herself.
Yes. It's not inclusive if cis women don't like it. Including trans men in legal conversations about protections, about healthcare, is not excluding white women or cis women or anyone else who has the capacity for birth. And so finding ways to be offended by the inclusion of other groups of people is a really new direction for TYT, and very concerning about the future of left-wing media. If you don't believe in new left-wing media, please like, subscribe, share this content. Where they fall, we will rise.
That's fair enough.
That's fair enough. Hey!
I mean, we have been, better at predicting what's actually going to happen in the future, as far as, politics. We have been more correct on a lot of things lately.
A lot of things.
Yeah, so, where they fall, we will succeed.
We will succeed. It's really, really terrible, but a large portion of this is basic common sense.
Absolutely.
That has just, completely
eluded all sense, because...
From large left-wing commentary.
Well, I think a lot of that, too, is just because of they're making so much money, they have to justify their own...
Right.
There's this belief that being a good person comes first compared to having good opinions and doing good things.
Yes.
It's being a good person is a designation you get if you do good things and have good opinions.
And to extrapolate off of that and to go even further with that same mindset, I would like to say that being progressive for your time is not the same thing as being progressive now. Okay? Thinking that black people sitting at the same lunch counter in the 80s is an okay thing, that was progressive for the 80s. Okay? We are beyond that, hopefully. We are beyond treating black people as basic humans. I would hope. Actually, no, we are not.
Yeah.
We're
But also, that goes back to the universal truths that we've been talking about, is that black people have always viewed themselves as human.
As always, yes.
And because they are. And asking white people to confirm this knowledge is the problem.
Yes.
Because it's not up to them whether or not black people are human. It's not up to the majority whether or not, disabled people should be able to access public life.
Yes.
It's not up to cis people whether trans people should be able to access public life.
Yes.
That is base decency, and that is, the way it should be. Mm-hmm. It's not beholden to public opinion. Mm-hmm. It's just a right. And as far as our last point, so direct action, we've aimed to argue, is moral, necessary, and achievable. And so as far as achievable, we want to leave it on this knowledge that direct action itself is not a means to an end, and viewing it that way is incorrect. Direct action has to serve a moral purpose on its own, and it does serve a moral purpose often. Ruby and Jessica, the activists that we've been talking about this whole time, their direct action against the Dakota Access Pipeline, destroying that property, ensuring that the construction could not continue for months, that is a moral action. It being a crime does not compromise that. It being dangerous, risky, or have the potential to cause harm does not negate that.
Yes, I agree. I want to give a couple more examples with that. And I want to extrapolate going even further that not only is it doing direct action, a good way to look at that, is it moral in and of itself, but is it a closed loop in and of itself? Is it a good in and of itself? I'll go back to the runaway slave example. When that person who was enslaved runs away from the South and flees to the North, let's say they make it into Canada, that does not free all enslaved people in South America. But that person who ran away is now free. That in and of itself is a positive. That is a win. That should be celebrated. In the same way, when you have the Extinction Rebellion group coming forth today in the UK in South Wales, block off a coal pit mine, they shut it down using nonviolence, direct action. That in and of itself is a win. It doesn't stop all of climate change. It doesn't stop fossil fuel corporations, Exxon, from raising prices and making money. But that halts them from exploiting workers and damaging our ecosystem in which we live right now. They will lose money off of that right now. They won't be able to pollute our airs and our waterways right now. And that is a win. Sometimes when you're fighting a war, you have to look at it from battle to battle.
And I don't think it's hyperbolic to say, capitalists are at war with the people of Earth.
Yes.
That we go over that in our necessary section. We go over that every day. We know that we are getting completely fucked by the powers that be. And that even though we have it bad as working class Americans, there are people in third world countries, people who are facing the worst effects of climate change and colonialism, that have it just as bad, if not way worse. It is a mistake to think that we are at the end of history.
Yes.
There is an Ursula K. Le Guin quote from The Lathe of Heaven that she says, "The end justifies the means, but what if there is never an end? All we have is means." And I really like that because it goes back to something that Donte and I talk about often, which is that there is no progressive end point.
Yes.
At which we have done all we can do for the people and for each other.
We've written the perfect law that could never be misunderstood or not enforced or taken advantage of. That day will never come.
And expectations that it will are foolhardy.
Yes.
And they are dangerous to the progressive movement, which must find meaning in the struggle towards liberation.
Yes.
Because that is all we have.
Yes.
All we have are means. And so, in order to make those means matter, every direct action we take must be a moral victory itself, on its own. And it must do something good for the people of the world and who need it. To end off on a sort of clarifying point, a misconception that we have observed a lot of places is that everyone has to have consensus, right, in order to make something good happen.
Yes.
And that isn't true. There are two components to making positive change. That is education and power. When symbolic and direct actors have agreed upon political beliefs, change and progress can be made more efficiently. Education and power can be wielded and achieved faster because the ideas reinforce each other. But change can still be made without everyone agreeing on every aspect of what they want the future to look like. We only have to agree to commit our own actions and not anything else about it.
Exactly. Looking at the repeal of Roe v. Wade is a perfect example of it. More people after the repeal of Roe v. Wade were in favor of a women's right to choose, but that did not give them the power in which to act on that. A select group of people ruled and took away that right from millions of Americans and millions of women. And they got what they wanted. So you can really see that the will of the people, in many ways, is not necessarily connected to the power to change things and enact laws. And that is something that a lot of people need to understand while going forward and while utilizing power.
Yeah, and that's going to be actually our next conversation, is about how to utilize power, when, why, just all about power and political movements.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Like, share, subscribe.
Oh, God.